Galactic Unification. Chapter 2. The Unification Mandate. Part 1. Echoes of Past Conflict. The chilling silence that descended upon Earth after the Xylosian invasion was a stark counterpoint to the cacophony of human history. For millennia, humanity had been a species defined by its internal discords, a symphony of squabbling nations, warring ideologies, and endless contests for dwindling resources. Now, under the unifying shadow of an existential threat, these ancient schisms seemed not merely foolish, but tragically, almost unbelievably, petty. Captain Dubois, his gaze fixed on the distant alien occupation forces patrolling the skeletal remains of what was once a bustling port city, often found his thoughts drifting back. He remembered the border skirmishes in his youth, the jingoistic fervor whipped up by politicians eager for a distraction, the lives lost over lines drawn in sand that the Xylosians, with their vast interstellar empires, would have found utterly meaningless. He recalled the heated debates in military academies about strategic doctrines, the endless simulations of terrestrial warfare, all of it rendered utterly obsolete by a single, overwhelming extraterrestrial force. What had it all been for? The millions of lives, the mountains of resources, the collective ingenuity poured into the art of self-destruction. It was a sobering reflection, one shared by many of his surviving comrades. They had been soldiers of France, of Britain, of the fragmented nations that once constituted Earth. Now, they were simply survivors, bound together by a shared peril that dwarfed any former allegiances. The uniforms were tattered, the insignia often indistinguishable, replaced by the universal symbol of defiance against a common enemy. Dr. Anya Petrova, hunched over a sputtering console in the echoing depths of the Moscow metro, found a similar, albeit more intellectual resonance. Her research, funded by a consortium of nations ostensibly for peaceful space exploration, had been a constant negotiation with competing national interests and budgetary constraints. There had been endless disputes over intellectual property, over the sharing of raw data, over the prestige of scientific discovery. She remembered the acrimonious international conferences, the whispered accusations of espionage, the suspicion that always lurked beneath the surface of collaboration. All of it, the Xylosian threat made terrifyingly clear, had been a colossal waste of cognitive and material resources. The energy that had been expended on political maneuvering, on justifying defense budgets, on developing weapons designed to kill other humans, could have been harnessed to build a truly unified planetary defense. The advanced theoretical physics that had been confined to academic silos, the brilliant minds that had been diverted to military applications rather than pure discovery, now represented lost opportunities. The Xylosians, with their seemingly effortless technological superiority, had inadvertently revealed the crippling inefficiency of humanity's fragmented approach to progress. Her own work, once a delicate balancing act of international diplomacy and scientific rigor, was now a desperate race against time, fueled by a stark understanding that every moment spent on internal bickering was a moment closer to utter extinction. In the Amazon, ch2, the young warrior leading his disparate tribes against the alien machines, felt this keenly in a way that transcended abstract thought. His people, though deeply connected to their land and traditions, had also carried the scars of past divisions. Inter-tribal rivalries, fueled by generations of suspicion and competition for hunting grounds, had often simmered beneath the surface of their communal existence. He remembered the elders speaking of ancient feuds, of blood spilled over perceived insults and territorial disputes. The arrival of the Xylosians had, in a brutal but effective manner, forced a reckoning. The alien resource extraction, the indiscriminate destruction of the rainforest, was a threat that recognized no tribal boundaries. The jaguar and the macaw, the ancient spirits of the forest, were being silenced by the same mechanical roar. ch2 had seen the fear in the eyes of his neighbors, the same fear that mirrored his own. It was this shared terror, this common threat to their very existence, that had begun to erode the old barriers. He had stood before a council of elders, men and women who had once viewed each other with wary suspicion and spoken not of ancient grudges, but of the shared earth beneath their feet, the shared sky above them, and the shared enemy that threatened to consume it all. The futility of their past squabbles was laid bare by the sheer scale of the present danger. The land that had been a source of division was now the very thing they were fighting to protect, a unified purpose forged in the crucible of shared adversity. Colonel Ivan Volkov, standing amidst the stark utilitarian beauty of the Siberian launch complex, felt the weight of history's follies most acutely in the silent, echoing halls of power. The strategic rocket forces, once the apex of Soviet military might, had been designed to deter a specific enemy, to wage a war of planetary annihilation. The entire apparatus, the vast infrastructure, the years of training, the ideological fervor, had been directed at a terrestrial rival. Now, that rival was gone, replaced by an enemy whose very existence rendered Earth's most fearsome weapons largely impotent. He looked at the towering missile, a monument to a past era of conflict, and felt a profound sense of irony. This instrument of terrestrial destruction, born from an age of suspicion and brinkmanship, was now being repurposed into a vessel of escape, a desperate gamble to preserve a fragment of humanity. He recalled the Cold War, the constant tension, the drills, the fear of annihilation that had permeated society. All of it, the billions spent, the lives dedicated, the constant state of readiness, had been for a conflict that would never come, a threat that paled in comparison to the one that now loomed overhead. The pettiness of national pride, the obsession with ideological purity, the fear of the other that had defined so much of human endeavor, now seemed like a childish temper tantrum played out on a galactic stage. The Xylosians cared nothing for communism or capitalism, for democracy or autocracy. They cared only for conquest and resource acquisition. Humanity's internal divisions, so fierce and all-consuming for so long, were utterly irrelevant to their alien calculus. This profound realization was not a solitary one. Across the shattered remnants of civilization, survivors grappled with the same uncomfortable truths. The news feeds, before they were silenced, had been a constant barrage of nationalistic rhetoric, of border disputes, of economic rivalries. Now, those same people, huddled in makeshift shelters, scavenging for food and evading alien patrols, understood the stark contrast. The conflicts that had once seemed so vital, so world-ending, were now mere footnotes in a much larger, more terrifying story. The wasted potential was staggering. Think of the scientific breakthroughs that had been stalled by geopolitical rivalries, the medical advancements delayed by patent wars, the sustainable energy solutions ignored in favor of fossil fuel empires. All of it was a testament to humanity's inability to see beyond its own immediate tribal concerns. The Xylosian invasion, in its brutal efficiency, had acted as a terrible, cosmic wake-up call. It had forced humanity to confront the sheer absurdity of its past divisions. The national flags that had once flown with such pride were now tattered remnants, or worse, symbols of a past that had failed to protect them. The ideological battles, fought with such ferocity, were now moot, replaced by the fundamental, species-wide imperative to survive. In the ruins of a London library, a former historian, now a scavenger named Eleanor, found herself surrounded by the ghosts of human conflict. The books spoke of empires risen and fallen, of wars fought over land, religion, and resources. She had spent her life studying these conflicts, analyzing the causes and consequences. Now, she was living through the ultimate consequence, the culmination of humanity's long, bloody history of division. She looked at the dusty tomes, filled with tales of heroism and villainy, of treaties broken and alliances forged, and felt a profound sadness. The same drive that had led to the construction of magnificent cathedrals had also led to the development of devastating weaponry. The same ingenuity that had enabled exploration of the globe had also facilitated its exploitation. The Xylosian invasion had stripped away the veneer of civilization, exposing the raw, primal struggle for existence. And in that struggle, the old divisions, the nationalistic fervor, The ideological divides were as relevant as the armor of a Roman legionary against a plasma cannon. They were relics of a bygone era, utterly useless against the alien threat. The energy, the intellect, the sheer human will that had been poured into these internal struggles should have been, directed outwards, towards understanding the cosmos, towards safeguarding their own world. The irony was not lost on anyone who survived the initial onslaught. The United Nations, once a forum for diplomatic maneuvering and often impotent resolutions, was now a distant memory. The global economic system, built on competition and trade wars, had collapsed into a series of localized survival economies. The very concept of borders, so fiercely defended, had been rendered meaningless by the Xylosians' aerial dominance. It was a stark, brutal lesson in the fragility of human constructs. The world that had prided itself on its interconnectedness, its global communication networks, had been fractured and isolated in the face of a common enemy. Now, the survivors, like Dubois' small band in North Africa, or Petrova's clandestine team in Moscow, or Chaitin's United Tribes, were discovering the power of true, unforced unity. It wasn't born from treaties or declarations, but from the shared necessity of survival, from the dawning realization that their individual fates were inextricably linked. The echoes of past conflicts were fading, replaced by the urgent, unified call to protect the future. The pettiness that had once defined humanity now seemed like a tragic collective madness, a self-inflicted wound that had left them vulnerable when the true test arrived. The Xylosians had not conquered Earth by exploiting its weaknesses. They had simply arrived at a time when humanity's own internal battles had left it disarmed and divided, a ripe fruit ready for the plucking. But within that bitter lesson, a new understanding was beginning to bloom, a nascent appreciation for what could be achieved when humanity finally turned its formidable energies outwards, towards a shared destiny. The stars, once a symbol of infinite possibility, had become a stark reminder of their cosmic insignificance and the urgent need to overcome their terrestrial squabbles for the sake of their very existence. The memory of those past conflicts served not as a point of contention, but as a cautionary tale, a stark illumination of the tragic waste of human potential. It was a somber inheritance, but one that, perhaps, held the key to their collective survival. The universe had shown them the precipice, and in the terrifying void, they were finally beginning to see each other, not as rivals, but as fellow travelers on a perilous journey.